What's going on, everybody? You've got the card board coach here with your boy, Coach Co. And team, today we've got a very special guest on the podcast here. We've got Graham Reed, aka GRAEMAZING. For those of you who don't know, he is a level 7 wizard.
Totally real. Totally real. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm a listener. It's cool to be here. It's fun to experience the intro.
Yeah. I didn't. I mean, if you were gonna tell me like 5 years ago that someone was gonna say that about an intro, it's just funny. I don't know. I never really thought about it like that, but I guess there is like a there's a
Well, it's so important. It's so important to have that iconic rhythm when you start off a podcast, whether it's music or an intro line or something like that. But a hook, a good branding hook, that's what really elevates people above the. You can't if it's just all over the place and there's no plan of attack. I mean, that can be a thing, but having a little flow there keeps it nice, keeps it identifiable. Branding.
That's exactly it. And it's funny. I think I went like 2 weeks one time without recording. Not for you guys though. You guys get it once a week, so don't worry. But there are times where if I go away, I have to like if the schedule's not lined up, I got to do like 3 or 4 in a matter of like 8 days, just to make sure I got some banked. And I'll come back and I kind of forget the intro a little bit. I'm like, what are the words again? And so I have to like re-watch and re-listen to past episodes of mine to like, oh, it's like muscle memory. So all that about intros. I guess you guys didn't expect to hear that.
Well, I mean, it does relate. It is very pro wrestling. We haven't gotten there yet, but it is
No,
very
we
pro
haven't.
wrestling, right?
Ooh.
If you think about someone like Ric Flair, limousine ride and jet flying, you got to have these rhythms and flows, and that gets audience and people involved. You remember these lines. That's a huge thing. Like I like to pull from wrestling when I created my character, Amazing Level 7 Wizard.
I love
Segue.
I love that. Um yeah, it's funny. I mean, even when I shaved my mustache, one of the first things that like my good friend Peter said to me was like, he's like, "Oh, it's like a wrestling character." And I was like, "Huh, what are you talking about there?" I'm like, "What are you on to there, sir?" And he's like, "I don't know, man." He's like, "The Rock had like, it was like big hair days or, just uh flying Hawaii. He just like dressed differently and like there were just different stages
Mhm.
of like a wrestler's career and they change in those stages." And I was like, huh. Not to say I'm comparing myself to a wrestler, but I mean, while we're already on the track, we might as well.
We're in that space.
I mean, wrestling, they are some of the premier entertainers, maybe of all time, that aren't, I mean, that aren't, at least in like the sports space, because especially now that we saw the hype that Fanatics drew for WrestleMania, there's a lot of people I know that are getting back into wrestling after 20 plus years, man. And it's kind of crazy. I It's exciting. I'm not gonna lie to you. And that's why I was also kind of excited to do this video or this podcast rather, because a tiny part of me kind of wants to join them.
I think so. Wrestling, yeah, the wrestling experience. I think part of it is the demographic that's growing up right now. The influencers, right? That the age group probably of people that are 30 to 45 ish. Even when I listen to local radio, like where we are in Southern Ontario, I listen to 97.7 hits sometimes at a Niagara, and they are just talking about WrestleMania, wrestling nonstop. So I think it's in everyone's kind of pop culture realm all the time now. And it's funny at work. I was wearing an AJ Styles t-shirt. For people that if you're not up on your current wrestling or anything, AJ Styles is a pro wrestler. I was wearing an AJ Styles t-shirt and it was like cut off. But a coworker who was new just messaged me. I was like, "Is that an AJ Styles t-shirt?" And now we go to wrestling shows together. So
That's really cool.
yeah, it's one of those things that I think people keep a little bit secret, but if you know someone that feels safe that you can talk about wrestling, hey, you're into wrestling too, cool. And then you just have the craziest, longest conversations about what's your favorite match, what got you into wrestling, who's your favorite, and all those sorts of things. It's really fun.
I went to SummerSlam as a kid,
Did
when it
you
was in
really?
Toronto. Yeah, yeah. It must have been like '02 or something.
Wow, okay.
Um, yeah, I think so. I was young And I distinctly remember I must have been like grade 3 or 4, and I went to SummerSlam, or not Summer. Was did I just say SummerSlam? I think it was
Mhm.
SummerSlam, and it was just a hell of an experience. And I remember regularly like watching wrestling, and it's just interesting that like now it's kind of like gone full circle. I mean, the listeners are probably like, "What the hell are we talking about here?" For those of you who don't know, Graham collects wrestling cards. On top of the fact that he does magic, so we are going to dive into the magic. But I do first and foremost want to know about your wrestling card collecting, and it does that tie into magic in any way, shape, or form? And you've already kind of disclosed that you use some of that stuff when it comes to Gramazing level 7 wizard and like that character. Is there anything else that you kind of like pulled from wrestling?
Yeah, so I think for me, like the my two favorite things are pro wrestling and magic. And it's kind of they're both stems from the circus and the carnival. They're make believe worlds where you get to have a whole lot of fun. It's playing dress up. You're playing games, you're creating characters, you're creating make believe worlds and everything. So I think that's where I like both of those. However, I'm not a I'm not a physical person. I don't want to get hurt.
Yeah,
So I've never put myself in a wrestling ring. I really enjoy watching it. But magic has always grasped my attention in the same way the pageantry of it, the skillfulness that also exists in both magic and wrestling. I mean, it's not the same. It's not even close to the same because
no,
wrestling's
I
very
yeah,
physical.
yeah, but I understand where you're going with that.
Sure.
Yeah,
Similar to like comedians and performance art, it's all in that same sort of world. But for me, wrestling, it's always been in the family. I remember the family at family events would always gather on the TV with the grandparents and the cousins. And we'd watch all the weirdest pay-per-views together. We'd have family Royal Rumbles in the basement. My first cards that I collected were from the 90s. I grew up just outside of Hamilton, so I'd go to Comic Connection in Hamilton with my older brother, who's like 8 years older than me. So he was introducing me into how to collect. He'd be getting comic books. He's a big X-Men collector.
nice.
So I would be grabbing packs of those 1990 wrestling cards, which is the Undertaker. That's where you find the Undertaker's rookie card. If people
Yeah,
don't know the set, that's the important set for the Undertaker's rookie card. But I found my binder because we're in the middle of moving right now. Found the original binder that I had, and I found all my original cards. And there's the original wrestling cards I had with a really bad condition Undertaker rookie card, a
of
couple of
course.
them, and then a bunch of the original Marvel cards are in there too. And I remember that was my original collection and dabbling in a couple comic books. And then for me, I really got into Magic. So Magic became my primary collection. And I don't think I ever saw it as a collection until I started collecting wrestling cards. And I look back on all these things that this Magic for over 30 years, I've just been collecting tricks, books, VHS tapes, DVDs, instructional things, pamphlets. I have way too much info and playing cards and everything. And then I kind of have too much magic. I hit a point where it's like, there's too much. I know too much.
What do you
And
mean you wait. What do you mean you know too much?
it's not like you know too much. It's more like if I ever needed to learn a new trick, I have a full library of books. I don't need a new book to add to the
Okay,
library. I
all
don't
right.
need, plus if you're in the magic world and people are releasing new material, it's really just often a remix of older material.
Yeah,
So it's kind of already out there. You don't need to continuously add to this library. So I kind of stopped collecting and I felt like there was a void that was missing. So I was dipping into wrestling action figures. I was listening to the Major Brothers Wrestling Figure podcast with Matt Cardona, Zack Ryder from WWE,
yeah.
which was a great podcast. It's so nerdy to listen to wrestlers and their passion of growing up as kids collecting these figures. So I started doing it, but it was too big of a collection. Like even just having three of them takes up a lot of
Like
space.
physical space. Yeah,
Physical
yeah,
space, physical space.
yeah.
So they had a new podcast that was created that stemmed off of there called the Card Foundation podcast. And it was three guys that were just talking about wrestling cards. And this is when Upper Deck was coming out with the new AEW set. Tops was hot with Finest and Chrome in 2020 and 2021. There were some big sets. And it was also kind of announced they were losing their license and it was going to switch to Padini.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, what an interesting time to kind of maybe dive into wrestling cards and check this whole world out. So that's kind of when I took a leap into wrestling cards after doing a whole lot of research. So listening to a ton of podcasts, checking out YouTube channels, because I remember collecting as a kid and then looking at it's totally different.
Very different. Yeah,
Totally,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not even the same, not
No,
even the same thing at all.
no.
So that's kind of where I started evolved, and then I've kind of gone through the whole, I think, trajectory that every collector might go through, like where you rip a lot of packs and then you're like, whoa,
Yeah.
okay,
Let's calm
okay,
down here. You know,
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
what kind of money are we putting into this, and like what can we buy for this amount
yeah,
of money? You know, like
right.
when I say like what can I buy, like could I buy a house or could I buy a car? Like I'm talking like what else could I buy in in the collectible space? You know,
Yeah, you
like
could
it's
you could either purchase the card you actually want
yeah,
or
exactly.
open a ton of packs and then have too many base cards and have no clue what to do with these.
No
What do
idea.
you do with these?
Yeah, yeah. You just give them away, man. I usually just include them in my shipping process. So like anything I
Yeah,
sell, just like include some of those base in there. But
there's still too many. There's still some.
there's
There's
just
still so many.
yeah, I mean, much like it's ironic because you didn't want the action figures to take up too much space, and like just how many base cards I have, like the amount of space that shit takes up is crazy.
Oh yeah, in the
I'm like,
process of moving right now, when I look at the boxes next to me, there's too many boxes of cards that are. It's like this has to. When I move, step one is going to be kind of revisiting the whole collection and really slimming that thing down and, and going. I only want these few cards. I want to just keep it to as you start to learn in your collecting experience. Well, I mean, it's really up to you what you want to collect and how you do it. But for me, I'm starting to collect lower serial numbered autograph cards, just wrestlers and performers that are my favorite. I don't need to fill the space with just whoever, and luckily in wrestling, I think this is the unique thing too about collecting wrestling cards. There's only so many players and performers. It's not a ton of teams with like a ton of new rookies and tons
yeah,
of cards. There's only so many you can collect. So it's luckily it's an easy thing to dive into and it's a small community. So to get a card out of 10 is kind of easy to find at a fair
yeah,
price too, at a fair price,
yeah.
which is cool.
I mean, you touched on a lot of cool things there. Number one, I mean, anytime someone follows like their niche, I'm into that. Number two, yeah, I mean, going after one of these other niches, I say going after very loosely because you're doing this because you genuinely like collecting these.
Yeah.
But it's a lot easier to obtain things, you know, much like if you were collecting baseball, for instance, and you were collecting a pitcher that wasn't really like a name, like a mainstay pitcher. And quite frankly, like a pitcher of any kind, you can get some pretty cool parallels and like numbered cards and autographs if they have any, for relatively cheap in comparison to some of the other cards and other players and other sets and maybe even other sports. So I think that's really cool. Um, I, I feel like I mean, it's a natural progression, right? Like you start collecting, you rip, you don't really know what you like. In the process of ripping, you figure out what you don't like, and then you start buying stuff as a result of that. Once that happens, then you're like, okay, I may have too many of these things or too many random things, and consolidation inevitably occurs, and it usually results in more numbered stuff, less you know populated things that are probably harder to acquire, and things that you look at and you're like, I'm really proud of the fact that I kind of acquired this, right? There's like the journey that's attached to this card being in my possession at this very moment in time. I think becomes like very important, especially because we've just finished talking about collecting and how collecting was such a prominent thing in your life before, magic. And I just find it interesting that there's so many times I've had people on the podcast, and it always goes back to everybody collects. And it doesn't, I don't know, what it is right at the beginning, but everybody collects, whether it's hats or I had someone collect rubber duckies that was on here. Like, I mean, we started talking about baseball cards, but like eventually she was like, oh yeah, I actually collect rubber duckies as well. And I'm like, everybody, and I have for like 2 decades, like it's like you're telling me you collect magic. I mean, you were telling me before we even jumped on this podcast that you collected playing cards like
Yeah.
very early on, and I collect lanyards. So like every time I go to an event or like I've gone to a concert or I've
Hmm.
always kept a lanyard.
Oh, I
Uh
have all my concert tickets. I have all my event tickets. Luckily, we've been getting the physical tickets when I go to AEW. So I have all these physical tickets from first time in Toronto, first time in Hamilton, first time in London, some of these big matches that have happened, and keeping those things. And they're all stored with, some of these classic. I mean, I guess everyone's not probably listening to them from somewhere, but like Alexis on Fire, the first time they're playing in Toronto, those tickets, all these unique special events that you can sort back through and still have the physical memory. It's really awesome.
You have them sorted?
No, they're kind of in a stack. Like they're in an old cigar box.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty
But
cool.
they're all nicely
They're
neat
all
and laid out.
together.
Yeah, they're all together in the same
Yeah.
spot with some other unique autographs in there too. Older ones that aren't as well maintained because I wasn't keeping them as nice up until the point of collecting cards.
Like, what are we talking
Uh,
about?
like just local, like a Walter Gretzky autograph or a Penn and Teller autograph, or people who have done bands that have done magic tricks for, and just have them sign playing cards. So, like, just random kind of autographs and signatures like that.
I love that. See,
Cool.
and this is gonna segue perfectly into the playing cards and the magic stuff because this is how I met you.
Hmm.
And so I met you first, I want to say at the Fan Expo. Was
Yeah,
it?
I think
Did I meet you before that?
I think Fan Expo.
Was the first time I actually met you at
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
the
yeah,
NHL Fan Expo.
yeah.
Yeah. And so that was an experience that I wasn't expecting to see. I mean, there were sports cards there. There were sports cards, it was memorabilia. It wasn't just it was a very interesting I guess we haven't had an expo or an all-star game in a long time, but I was surprised. I know that Upper Deck does a lot of work with the NHL and stuff, but there was more sports cards and stuff of that nature than I expected. I think eBay had they had a presence there too, if I'm not mistaken. And then I see you there, and you come up to me and you want to do a magic trick, and I mean, I was drawn in for sure. And you sent me home with a playing card, which I still have, by the way. It's not in my immediate uh airspace, but I promise you it's still there. And that was pretty cool too. I mean, the fact that I kept that. So I that's my story with you, how I met you. That's where the cards comes from. I want to dive into why magic and how did you decide that you were going to send people on their way with like an autographed card
Oh,
of
and
theirs?
that's so interesting.
Yeah.
So for me, I got bit by the magic bug when I think I was 7 years old, and this kind of goes to what level seven. I claim my stage name, the persona is GRAEMAZING level 7 wizard. And at first, it sounded sing song, it rhymed real nice. I've kind of dove deep into it further. The whole idea of level seven, and maybe you experienced this when you saw the magic trick. You have this really weird. You're like, I don't know what happened. I don't know what's going on. It's a weird feeling that you don't get that often.
Mm-hmm.
But as a kid, when you're about 7 years old, everything constantly feels like magic. You're just learning new things, discovering new things. So I really feel like a magic trick because a big thing that people say is like, I wish my kids could see this. However, a lot of these tricks, like kids kind of can see through it, or it flies over their head, or it's not this. So you need specific magic for kids, and um, and I think when people say I wish my kids could see this, they're really saying I feel like a kid right now. I feel like a kid.
That's so cool.
So anyhow, going back to when I started into magic, I saw the magic specials on TV like in the 90s, when Fox and NBC, they used to always do these big special, you get Evil Knievel stunt jumps.
Yeah.
You get David Copperfield specials. The special that really attracted me was called World's Greatest Magic, and I think it came out in like 92 or something. And you would get the top champion magicians. So it'd be a stage show, I think hosted by Alan Thicke, and you would get close-up magicians, comedy magicians, illusionists, manipulators. You would see the entire thing. It'd be like watching WCW, WWF. You get luchadors, you get the big guy, you get female wrestlers, you get tag wrestling, you get kind of the whole circus, right? You get everything. So I was like, wow, I really like this. This is so much fun. It came to the point where my grandparents would call the house and be like, there's a magic show on tonight. Make sure you set the videotape, to hit record. And I still have all my VHS tapes that
I love
recorded all
that.
the TV specials. And then I went to the public library because that's what you do as a kid, and you ride around on a bike, pick up a Slurpee, and you go to the public library. And I pulled out a VHS tape that taught magic tricks. And the first thing I learned was how to make a salt shaker vanish and some basic card tricks. And eventually I got one of those videotape that you order through the mail. Marshall Brodeen is the specific. Some people might know this name, some people not. But you get this TV magic cards is what you would get. And I remember this is now like grade 5, and I'm using my TV magic cards at school, walk around doing tricks. Eventually I meet a restaurant magician. I go to a local restaurant in Hamilton, and a magician comes tableside and shows tricks. And I was like, okay, like this is you can do this as a
Like
job
there's a career. There's a career. Yeah.
outside of the TV.
Yeah.
Like you can, like you can, there's people in town that do this.
Yeah.
So I started to job shadow this restaurant magician. His name was Magic Mike, conveniently before the movie. Um,
That's
but
wild.
he's I think I was really lucky meeting Mike when I first started getting into magic, because he had really strong values. And magic is a strange community that you get involved in, especially as a kid or someone that's naive and trying to learn. It's a world that's about secrets. And the way people, whether people want to explain secrets to you or not, that's their choice. Whether they want to just straight up lie to you about what the secret is so that you fall down the wrong path and it becomes harder and you don't want to do it anymore, that's can happen too. But I lucked out with Magic Mike. He taught and trained me how to approach a table, approach people, get these DVDs or these books. These will teach you the best tricks that will serve you the rest of your life. And just he taught me great, like, give away your tricks. If you see someone that's really interested in magic, pass it on to someone else. Give them your cards, give them the props in your pockets, and pass it on and your email, and encourage, like, hey, contact me to learn. So that was like the first person and that was the tricks that I learned from him are exactly the same tricks that you saw me perform a couple weeks ago, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm still doing the same things, and it's just polished up. So I started performing in restaurants, eventually evolved to corporate parties, doing the Christmas corporate for some like big brands like Home Depot, Microsoft, IKEA. Um, and then, COVID hits. I started doing virtual magic shows, started connecting with people doing virtual magic shows, which is fun. I did the wrestling connection there is I was on Psycho Sid's podcast. I don't know if you
Nice.
remember the wrestler
Yeah.
Psycho Sid.
Yeah.
I did magic with him, which I think he really wanted to kick the crap out of. Like, he did not like my presentation. He did not
No,
like my giggle. He's like, "Who is this guy?" And I was
that's
like,
so
"Oh,"
funny.
I got so nervous and terrified. Luckily, it was virtual and he couldn't kill me.
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
all ego Ethan Page from AEW wrestling too. I did a vlog with him where you can see like my whole virtual magic show. But yeah, that's kind of like the magic journey. And then I always have a pack of cards in my pocket. When I got introduced to the sports card world and I did the local shows, and you listen to the podcast, everyone talks about the national. I haven't been to the national yet, gotta go.
It's a good time.
But then everyone talks about the sports card expos being one of the biggest things. It's just down the street from me. So I went and I have a pack of cards. The first thing we did, my buddy Gordo and I, we beeline it to Upper Deck booth. And this is, I think, one of the first expos after the pandemic.
Yeah.
So this would have been there's an older build.
2021 maybe.
Yeah, I think so. In the fall?
Yeah, that would make
Yeah.
sense.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember it was a lot smaller. It was totally different than it is now. But we went right to the upper
And there
deck
was
booth.
like there were curtains like to get to the second building, and it
Yeah,
was like a
yeah.
mess. No one knew where the hell they were.
It
Is that what you
kind of
remember?
reminded me of like an equestrian, like one of those horse shows that you
Yeah,
go
yeah, okay.
to.
Then we're good. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's probably
yeah.
2021 the fall expo.
Yeah, okay. But we went straight to the upper deck booth. Hey, what do you got for for wrestling? And they had nothing. They don't have anything for wrestling because they're there for the hockey group, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay. And I was like, well, I started doing tricks because I was like, let's see what can happen. See what can happen. I started doing tricks to them, instantly meet the team, and they remember me. The next time I go to the expo, the team remembers me. I do more tricks for the team again. I started doing more tricks for some of the vendors around the expo too, and getting to know more people. I think the second time I went, I bumped into Jeff Wilson, sports card investor, and you see him there with his cameras. And I just tapped Doug on the shoulder and I said, "Hey, do you think he wants to see a magic trick?" He's like, "I think he wants to see a magic trick." So I got on his like vlog really quick, doing a quick magic trick, and get the line, which I think you said too. What's a sports card show without cards?
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
that was the first one. And then the next time I go back, I bump into Mojo. And I know who Mojo is because I've seen his vlogs, because he taught me about how to sort and organize my sports cards. And I watch his vlog. He's fun. So I started watching that, and then I shared tricks with him, and I got on his vlog too, and then
Yeah.
got on his vlog again with the whole Mint Ink team, and people started kind of discovering me. And every time I would go and share magic with the Upper Deck team, and I didn't realize this, and maybe you might be about all this, but you start to like project where you want to go.
Yeah, of
what you want to do, who you want to work with, and whether you're doing it unintentionally or you're just thinking about it, but there's a projection happening.
course.
And I was like, I'm gonna work with Upper Deck. So I'm gonna work this expo or something. I don't know what's gonna happen. And they kicked around a couple ideas to me. And then I guess just this past expo, they're like, hey, and I don't follow hockey. I'm not a hockey
Yeah,
person.
yeah, we talked about that already. Yeah.
So they're like, hey, the All-Star game is coming up. Do you want to work that? I was like, yeah, yeah, that sounds really cool. That sounds really big. That sounds
Yeah.
very big. So we went back and forth and we worked it out that I was going to work the NHL All-Star game at the Fan Expo, the biggest like trade show I've ever done, with some of the biggest brands, and it was an incredible experience. It was unreal. So much so behind me there's a poster right over here
Yep.
over my shoulder, and it's so crazy to have Upper Deck and the NHL mascot logo, and this character that I created, Gramazing Level 7 Wizard, out of my imagination, is on that poster with showtimes for Upper Deck sports cards. Like it's an unreal thing, the biggest opportunity I've ever had. And while I was doing card magic, there were people from high school that saw me. There were people that saw me that I performed magic when I was a teenager, tableside at the restaurant. And they're like, "This is my son. You got my son into magic. Can I take a picture with you and my son?" Like this, this is a lot of full circle moments. And then on top of it too, like my brother, who's was a big hockey card collector. All his hockey cards are still in my parents' basement. He lives in Michigan. We don't really communicate. Like we don't talk that often just because of the distance. And
Yeah.
we've never talked so much before, back and forth. He's showing me pictures of his hockey cards that he's collecting again. He's showing me when he was at the NHL All-Star game with my niece and nephew. And it was an unreal full circle moment to kind of get that accomplishment. I still can't believe it happened. Like it was totally crazy.
I absolutely love that story. And especially because it just sounds like very, very early on you found something you were passionate in and you just continue to kind of like press forward there. My question to you is you how did you know? Like how did you know you were or yeah, how did you know you were going to be a magician? Because like honest to God, like most people would be like, "What the fuck do you mean you're gonna be a magician?" Do you know what I mean? Like as a parent, like you'd be like, "Okay,
Oh,
like let's get real," or you
so
know,
it,
like, "Are you gonna get a real job?" Like you know what I mean? Like I'm not being disrespectful, but like I'm saying what everybody was thinking until you actually made it. Do you know what I mean?
well, I think so. This is the everyday thinking of like, how silly is this thing, right? Because I am calling myself Amazing Level 7 Wizard. It's very goofy. The whole thing is, but I have put a lot of time into it, and it does feel like it's really making sense now. But I honestly think, because I've been on TV, I've done TEDx, I've performed or presented at TEDx in front of hundreds of people live and thousands of people virtually live. I've done really like I've performed for Home Depot, performing in all of their workspaces, like all of the offices across Ontario at once, virtually, and interacting with people in their lunchrooms. Like Microsoft Canada, perform for schools across the country and doing virtual magic to people on a bus. But it wasn't until I did the NHL All-Star Weekend that, like, my dad who's 75, doesn't have a cell phone or anything, took the train in, came in and watched me perform. And I think like my parents were so everyone really understood that all this work I think that I put into this, I considered an art project. This whole project I've been working on, it's paying off. It's
30
all
30 years in the making.
30 years in the it's not an overnight thing. Like this takes a lot. Even all the lines and the character grimacing levels, it would start off. I wasn't grimacing until college, and then the name comes about. Adding level 7 wizard comes in because I do a monthly comedy show in Hamilton, with a group of comedians and actors that are from Toronto. So they've been on shows like The Boys and shows like Kim's Convenience and acted in, Priscilla, and some of these are really great performers. So I get to share the stage with some of these incredible people, and my character evolves every single time I perform, and I come up with new taglines. And the newest one I just added was the Denim Dazzler, which I think is really fun.
Love it.
So it's always evolving, and you just add a little piece, add a little piece, add a little piece. And I think you would understand this because it's similar to probably coaching, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say coaching, I would say even like content creation. Like I think that for me, I mean, I've been a trainer for like a while now. And you're right. Like you kind of come up with like a perfect formula and then you like, you know, take some of this off and add some of this. But for me, it's just the level of the creativity, I think, is just like a little different when it comes to content creation for me. Like I really am just like, okay, this is really like let's say if I was gonna break a video down into 45 seconds. I'm like, I really like this like first 6 seconds, this like middle 20, and I'm like, we're just making little tweaks here and there. And then you might have a like a beautiful 40 seconds, and then you watch enough videos and you talk to enough people and you're like, but we can make it a little bit better. You know what I mean? And so you like you shave some off here and so I guess the work is never really done if you enjoy what you're doing. Honestly, I am just absolutely floored that you've been on this journey for 30 plus years. And I mean, I'm all about the process, man. Like I tell people all the time, it's just it's only a matter of time. If you're doing what you actually want to do, it's like it's indifferent if it I mean it's not indifferent because like you still have to endure all that, you know, without actual getting the like results that you're looking for. But you were getting results along the way, right? Like you
Yeah,
said, like there were plenty of times where you were like, oh, like, you know, like I've like I can see how I can make it. You know what I mean? Or like I can see things materializing. And obviously there's a lot that goes on during that process, but there's a few instances where you're like, okay, like this is working, this is working, this is working. But to kind of like have it all come together where we're at right now. And it's entirely possible that if we have, or if and when we have a conversation 10 years from now, like you're going to have three or four full circle moments, you know, between now and then where you're like, you know, that conversation or that instance, you know, that just added to this. And so, yeah, I think that the telling stories, you know, the process and being able to, I mean, that's what you're doing when you're doing a magic trick. You're telling stories, right?
yeah, that's all it is storytelling because a magic trick, it only happens in someone's mind and imagination. Besides that, I'm really just shuffling cards really well in front of you, right?
Yeah. It's all about this. It's all about the story.
It's all about the storytelling, and even there was a clip that we recently shared on Instagram. Thank you for filming that,
Of
by the
course,
way.
man.
But that entire piece is just a storytelling moment, and it there's a time delay, and these are all those things. Like this is the stuff that if you are learning a new skill, and I guess this this relates right back to collecting too, that whole journey of collecting, right? You start in one place, then you eventually start to figure it out for yourself. And you maybe also when you start collecting, you see other people with these grandiose collections. And then you're like, well, I only have this. But over time your collection grows. It gets bigger, it
Yeah.
changes, it evolves, you trade it, and it you trim it down. It's kind of the same as performing these tricks over time. Like you get new lines, you trim them down, you get a joke, and then you trim the joke down, and then you throw that joke out because it's totally not timely anymore.
Yeah.
And you bring something new in, or you realize you're performing for a sports card group. And you brought up how everybody collects. So a big question that because I'm constantly collecting all the time. I always ask, what do you all collect? And a common thing people say is money. Like that is a thing that people do
Yeah.
collect.
Yeah.
Some people are just focused on financial savings and how can we get more investments. And that's a collection. That kind of is that's how you express yourself in your free time. And that's what you're really passionate about. Just
Yeah.
like any other weird sort of collection.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like with the money collecting, like I know a lot of people that collect coins or like bills.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, but
yeah.
not so much bills anymore, but actually they have like different 20s over the years, or they have like like the fives and how those have changed over the years, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
I got those.
do you? Dude, you
Yeah.
have too many things you collect.
I'm not a hoarder. I promise I'm not a hoarder. I'm not, you know what I also think this is weird. My grandma, she was addicted to the Home Shopping Network.
Cool.
Remember
Yeah, of
yeah.
course. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And there were 8 grandchildren. So if she would, this was her justification. And I realize now, looking back, it was always funny to us as we were kids, but looking back, the justification was like, oh, I can get 8 of these in my collection and give them to the grandkids. So she, if there was a piece of the Berlin Wall that you'd get in a little velvet pouch, got it. We got that. Special commemorative coin for like 1998. Got it. Got that.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. I got all these random home shopping with like certificate, and no one wants these things. They're so strange.
I wonder where this comes from. You know what I mean? Like it's like it's just embedded. Everyone collects. It's just
Mhm.
like this like deep need to like hunter gather, you know, like just like to hoard resources of some kind. Like these wouldn't even be considered resources, but like something for trade or for barter or I really don't know where it comes from, but it is just prevalent
And then
all the time.
I even find too that if people are like, I don't collect anything, I'm a minimalist. It's like you probably are a hoarder of information. That you probably collect a lot of strange podcast information. You're probably into conspiracy theories. You're learning how to put solar panels up. Like, you got a lot of. You're collecting information, is what you're collecting.
You're collecting, oh yeah, you just collect even the goods, right? Like I mean,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
you know,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you're
Yeah,
just
the latest farming knowledge, the
yeah,
latest rain
exactly.
barrel collection.
Yeah, you go into the shed, it's just like three different types of hose and you know
Yeah, that piece of hose is for just in case.
I love it. Yeah, and I mean it's true. Like I just think that people collect like they always something. And I don't know. It's got to be some like innate deep desire as a human to just have something, whether that's like a legacy, whether that's the like memories, you know, like the ability to conceptualize time. Because I find time is like, I mean, we don't have to get into this because like it becomes a whole different discussion, but I mean, it's hard to process time, right? Like time is like both very quickly and very slow at the same time. It's
I
often,
get
right? Like,
this is weird that this kind of came up while I was thinking about this at the same time, and how it eventually ends.
yeah,
Um, I collect. My big thing is collecting autographs. So I like collecting autographs. Um, do you you get birthday cards, right, from family members?
yeah,
Do you
yeah.
keep those? What do you do with those?
So that's a good question, actually. I'm like split. I used to collect all of them, and then I realized there's just way too many birthday cards, and yeah, you have to make a decision on what you keep and what you don't.
Mhm.
Now I keep ones that have like if someone's putting time and energy into like writing like stuff in it, it doesn't just say like like love mom. I'm like
Mhm.
and like happy 18th or some shit. Like I'm probably throwing that one out. Sorry, mom. But like if someone actually like takes the time and like they've written something that kind of like stamps this moment in time, if that
Mhm.
makes sense. Like, oh, like I
Yeah,
really enjoyed like the time that we've spent to go together over the last 2 weeks or whatever. Like, I don't fucking know what the situation is, but like those are the ones I'll keep. Like, if someone put time and energy into it, and it like kind of stamps that moment in time, like I'll keep that.
I realize. So when because they're in the moving, and you find like, oh, there's another box of photos and cards. There's another box of photos and cards. But I was flipping through them, and I realized some of these people aren't with us anymore. And you're like, I there's an autograph at least from them still. It's such a unique piece. That's a really unique autograph to have. Like, these are the
Yeah,
last few autographs of my grandfather. And when I look at those, and then you maybe look at an earlier one that you had, you can see when the autograph starts to change, right? You start to see the deterioration and the cursive nature of it, and so that's kind of neat. But I do agree. Like, you can't keep them all. You got to trim the fat on
you
some of
have,
those. But I
you have.
think it is something, especially if we're card collectors. I could see a bunch of us probably collecting these personal birthday cards. And talking about autographs, that poster back there, because that was such a important experience. I had the entire Upper Deck team sign it.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I autographs are something that as another thing that we all just kind of gravitate towards. I remember as like a kid, I was at like Disneyland and I wanted every single autograph for those goddamn characters. And I was like 8
Yeah.
and I didn't even really care too much about Disneyland, but I had this dumb little book and I think I still have it actually.
Hmm.
And I just wanted to get every single character to sign my book.
Yeah. I
Every
still
single
got mine
character.
too.
Yeah. Every single character, man. I
But
love
that was
that.
such a special experience when the
Yeah.
character that you're watching on TV is now interacting with you,
Yeah.
and the Disney signatures are unreal because they're all so special, and like it's not a lazy autograph at
Yeah.
all.
I
That's
couldn't
like
agree
a
more.
really cool experience. Um, yeah, I think that's why the autograph experience. I remember meeting pro wrestlers as a kid. I met
Yeah.
Shawn Michaels and Sonny at the local Walmart.
I love that.
Sonny, who I think is now in prison.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's wild. I
yeah.
love it. Brother, I've had such a great time with you today. And I'm sure everyone else has had an amazing time listening to, not just the fact that we've all collected and you've collected extensively, but also talking about your magic and how, I mean, not only like your magic, but the magic that you have inside you to kind of pursue something for such a long period of time. How can people get in contact with you if they have events upcoming, if they just want to learn more about magic, like how can we move forward?
Yeah, so the best way to contact me is Instagram at GRAEMAZING, GRAEMAZING. You can check out my wrestling card collection at Wrestling Card Wizard, also on Instagram. If you were to go to my website, grahamreedmagic.com, is where you can learn more, probably see some video links of me on TV with Mojo and some other sports videos like that. If you want to book me for an event, I do more corporate events, festivals, functions like that. I don't necessarily do the kid's birthday party anymore. It's not really in the.
He's upgraded people.
I've upgraded a little, but you know what? It's not really that I upgraded. It's when you start to realize it's like what your niche is.
Yeah,
And I saw there's other kids performers that are the best, and I can never be as good as they are. And I do what I do really well. So that's just the difference.
I love that. Team, I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Cardboard Coach featuring Gramazing Level 7 Wizard. As always, thank you so much for giving us your time, and I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of the day. Coach Co and Gramazing are out of here. Peace.